They asked for help. But the Deathworlders Armada showed up. Ambassador Zelith's 3 hearts hammered against her chitinous chest as she stood before the Galactic Council's emergency assembly. The massive chamber, built to accommodate thousands of species, felt eerily empty with only the core members present. War had a way of thinning crowds. Honored Council, Zelith began, her translator converting her clicking mandibles into the standard galactic tongue. The Korthak Empire has moved beyond our worst projections. They've consumed 17 systems in the past lunar cycle alone. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The reptilian Seth representative coiled tighter around his speaking perch, while the gaseous Forthani's containment suit flickered with agitated colors. Even the normally stoic crystalline collective's representative dimmed noticeably. "How many refugee ships?" asked Counselor Vex, the ancient amphibian who'd led the council for over 3 centuries. 47 million souls scattered across makeshift camps, Zelith replied, her voice cracking. The Korthak don't just conquer, they harvest. Every living being in their path becomes either slave labor or... She couldn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what the Korthak did to those they deemed unfit for slavery. The silence stretched uncomfortably. The council had protocols, procedures, diplomatic channels, but the Korthak Empire followed none of these civilized conventions. They were a military machine that had emerged from the galactic rim with technology that seemed almost magical in its destructive efficiency. "Our combined fleets?" Vex asked, though his deflated posture suggested he already knew the answer. 38 ships remain operational from our initial force of 300, reported Admiral Corinth of the Galactic Defense Force, the purple-skinned warriors normally proud. Bearing had been broken by months of devastating defeats. The Korthak shield technology deflects our energy weapons, and their hull plating laughs at our kinetic bombardments. Worse yet, they adapt to our tactics within hours of engagement. "What about the Nexari hegemony?" someone called out. "Their quantum torpedoes?" "Gone," Corinth said simply. "The Nexari homeworld fell yesterday. We received their final transmission 8 hours ago." The weight of that news settled over the chamber like a funeral shroud. The Nexari had been one of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the galaxy. If they'd fallen, what hope did anyone else have? "There must be something," Zelith insisted, her voice rising. "Some ally we haven't contacted, some weapon we haven't tried, some—" "Actually," interrupted Dr. Felix, the Council's xenobiological advisor, "there is one option we haven't explored." The small, gray-skinned scientist's hesitation was palpable, though I'm not sure we should. Every eye, optical sensor, and perception organ in the chamber focused on the nervous scientist. Felix had advised the Council for decades, cataloging species across the galaxy, but he'd never spoken with such reluctance. "Speak." "Doctor," Vex commanded. Felix activated his holographic display, showing a small yellow star system on the galaxy's outer spiral arm. "Sol system. 3rd planet. Classification: Death World. Species: Human. Status: quarantined by Council Order 847 Alpha." The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Several delegates actually recoiled from the display as if the hologram itself might contaminate them. "You can't be serious," gasped the ethereal representative, her translucent form flickering with horror. "They're from a Class 12 death world. The atmospheric composition alone would kill most of us, and that's before considering the indigenous life forms." "The gravity is twice galactic standard," added another delegate. "The electromagnetic radiation from their star would fry our electronics. And the humans themselves?" He shuddered visibly. Dr. Felix nodded grimly. "I've read the initial survey reports. Terra experiences regular seismic activity, violent weather patterns, and temperature fluctuations that would be considered torture devices on most worlds. The oceans are filled with predators the size of our starships. The land masses teem with creatures that exist solely to kill and consume other life forms. And the humans evolved to be apex predators on this nightmare world," Zelith whispered, remembering fragments of the classified reports she'd glimpsed during her tenure on the Xenological Committee. "Precisely," Felix confirmed. "They're persistence hunters who can literally chase prey to death. Their bone density is off our charts. Their muscle structure suggests they could tear apart most galactic species with their bare hands. They heal from injuries that would be fatal to us. And psychologically," he paused, gathering courage, "they seem to actively seek out dangerous situations for recreation." The Seth representative's forked tongue flicked nervously. The quarantine exists for good reason. The first contact team's reports were disturbing. These humans wage war against each other using weapons that would violate every galactic convention. They've developed hundreds of ways to kill efficiently, and they practice these methods on their own species. But that's exactly why they might be our answer, Zelith said, her analytical mind cutting through the fear. The Korthic Empire has steamrolled every civilized military force in the galaxy. Maybe we need something uncivilized. Vex's ancient eyes fixed on the holographic display of the small blue and green world. The quarantine has stood for 50 years. These humans don't even know we exist. How would we contact them? How would we explain what we need? Carefully, Dr. Felix replied. According to our surveillance data, they've developed primitive space travel. They have orbital installations and have begun exploring their local system. More importantly, they seem to have a concept they call helping the underdog. Underdog? Vex asked. A cultural fascination with supporting the weak against the strong, especially when the odds seem impossible, Felix explained. Their entertainment media is filled with stories about small forces defeating larger, more powerful enemies. It appears to be a fundamental aspect of their psychology. The chamber fell silent as the weight of the decision loomed before them. Contact a quarantined Deathworld species that every scientific report suggested was terrifyingly dangerous. Or face extinction at the hands of the Korthic Empire. We're talking about unleashing something we might not be able to control, warned the Crystalline Collective's representative, her faceted surface reflecting the chamber's lights like fractured starlight. Perhaps, Zelith admitted, but the Korthic are already uncontrolled. At least this would be our choice. The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone expected. Fear of the unknown humans barely lost to fear of certain extinction. By a margin of 3 votes, the Galactic Council authorized first contact with the species that would either save them all or doom them to something worse than the Korthic Empire. Captain Sarah Chen was 3 hours into her routine patrol around the Jupiter mining stations when her communications officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez, nearly jumped out of his seat. "Captain, I'm picking up something impossible," Rodriguez said, his voice tight with disbelief. "There's a ship, but it's not in any database. The configuration doesn't match anything we've ever built." Sarah pushed off from the galley wall where she'd been drinking coffee and floated toward the bridge of the UES Prometheus. The ship was one of Earth's newest patrol vessels, equipped with the latest fusion drives and quantum communication arrays. But as she looked at Rodriguez's screen, she realized humanity's cutting-edge technology was about to feel very primitive. "Range?" she asked, settling into her captain's chair. 200,000 kilometers and closing slowly, reported sensor specialist Kim. "Captain, the power readings from that ship, they're off the charts. Whatever drives that thing makes our fusion reactor look like a campfire." The object on screen was unlike anything in human experience. It appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves that seemed to flow like captured water. Soft bioluminescent lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that suggested a heartbeat. "Any response to our hails?" Sarah asked. "That's the weird part, Captain," Rodriguez replied. "They're broadcasting on frequencies we didn't even know were possible. The computer is having trouble translating the signal structure, but..." He paused, double-checking his readings. "I think they're trying to communicate." Suddenly, the bridge speakers crackled to life with a sound like wind chimes mixed with clicking insects. Then, impossibly, words began to form. "Human vessel," the voice said, each word carefully pronounced as if the speaker was learning the language in real time. "We mean no harm. Request permission to communicate face-to-face? The translation device struggles with your linguistic concepts." The bridge crew exchanged glances. First contact with alien life was something humanity had theorized about for centuries, but the reality was both more mundane and more terrifying than anyone had imagined. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Prometheus," Sarah responded, proud that her voice remained steady. "You're the first non-human intelligence we've encountered. Who are you?" A pause stretched across space, filled with the hum of electronics and the sound of her crew's nervous breathing. "I am Ambassador Zelith of the Galactic Council," came the reply. "Captain Chen, I must be direct. We come not as explorers or diplomats seeking friendship, though we hope for both. We come because we are desperate." The alien ship moved closer and details became visible on the screen. What they had initially thought was decorative lighting was actually some kind of energy field that seemed to bend light around the vessel's edges. The ship was beautiful in an unsettling way, like looking at a deep ocean creature that had somehow learned to swim through space. "Desperate how?" Sarah asked. "Our civilization faces extinction," Zealith continued. "An enemy called the Korthak Empire has conquered most of our galaxy. They kill or enslave every species they encounter. Millions of worlds have fallen. Billions of beings have died. Our combined fleets cannot stop them." Sarah felt the weight of that statement settle over the bridge. Her tactical officer, Commander Torres, was already running calculations on his screen, trying to comprehend the scale of warfare being described. "I'm sorry for your loss," Sarah said carefully, "but I'm not sure how we can help. We've barely figured out how to travel within our own solar system." "Captain Chen," Zealith's voice took on an urgent tone, "your species evolved on what we classify as a death world. The gravity, the atmospheric pressure, the radiation levels, the aggressive life forms. Terra would kill most galactic species within hours, yet humans thrive there. You've built a civilization on a planet that serves as nightmare fuel for half the galaxy." Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his console. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy spikes from their ship. Whatever they're powering up, it's drawing more energy than our entire vessel produces." "It's a shield demonstration," Zealith explained, apparently monitoring their communications. "Watch your sensors." The space around the alien ship suddenly lit up as dozens of objects materialized. Asteroids, debris, even what looked like weapon fire from invisible sources. Everything struck a shimmering barrier around the vessel and simply stopped. The debris hung motionless, then slowly drifted away. "This is our most advanced defensive technology," Zealith continued. "The Korthak pierce these shields like paper. They've adapted to every weapon we possess, countered every strategy we've employed. In 6 months, they will reach the Council core worlds. After that extinction," Commander Torres spoke up. "Captain, if their technology is that advanced and they can't stop these Korthak, what makes them think we can?" "Because," Zealith replied, "humans fight differently. We've studied your historical records, those that leak into space through your entertainment broadcasts. You wage war in ways that would be considered impossible by galactic standards. You use tactics that violate every conventional military doctrine. More importantly, you seem to specialize in winning impossible battles." Sarah found herself leaning forward. "What do you mean?" "Your species has a documented pattern of defeating larger, better-equipped forces through unconventional means. You call it asymmetric warfare, but to us it looks like controlled chaos. The Korthak Empire is built on logic, adaptation, and overwhelming technological superiority. They've never faced an enemy that operates on, what's your term? Controlled insanity." The bridge crew absorbed this in silence. Sarah realized she was being asked to make a decision that would change human history forever. They were essentially being recruited as galactic mercenaries in a war they didn't understand, against an enemy they'd never seen, using weapons they'd never encountered. "What exactly are you asking?" Sarah said finally. "We need military advisors," Zealith replied. "Humans who can teach our forces to think like Deathworlders. To fight dirty, as you say, to embrace tactics that logical species would never consider. And if we refuse, then in 6 months the Korthak Empire will have consumed our galaxy. Eventually, they will turn their attention outward. Earth will fall, but not quickly. The Korthak prefer their conquest to struggle." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. Rodriguez was pale but determined. Torres was already pulling up tactical manuals on his screen. Kim was running sensor sweeps, probably trying to figure out how the alien technology worked. "Ambassador Zealith," Sarah said slowly, "I'm just a patrol captain. This decision is way above my pay grade, but I can get you in contact with people who can make that call. Time is a luxury we lack, Captain Chen. Even now, 3 more worlds burn. But yes, we must speak to your leaders. However, there is something else you should know." The alien ship's lights pulsed in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as a pattern of agitation. "When we make formal contact with your world leaders, we'll need to share information about galactic civilization. Your planet will be invited to join the council. But Captain," Zealith's voice carried a weight that made Sarah's skin crawl, "your species will also be classified as a Class 5 military threat. You'll be the first species to earn that designation based purely on biological and psychological factors, rather than technology." "Is that good or bad?" Torres asked. Unknown, Zalith admitted. No species has ever been given that classification before. We're in uncharted territory. Sarah took a deep breath, tasting the recycled air of her ship and wondering if it might be the last normal breath she'd take as a member of an isolated species. Rodriguez, open a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Tell them we've got a situation that's going to require the big chairs. She paused, then added, and tell them to wake up everyone. I mean everyone. This is going to be a long day. General Marcus Webb had seen a lot in his 40 years of military service, but nothing had prepared him for sitting across from a 7-foot-tall insectoid alien in the Situation Room beneath the Pentagon. Ambassador Zelith's clicking mandibles and compound eyes made her impossible to read, but her desperation was clear enough through the translation device she wore. Let me understand this correctly, Webb said, reviewing the holographic display that showed the galactic situation. You're fighting an empire that has conquered 3/4 of known space and you want us to help because we're better at violence than the rest of the galaxy? Oversimplified but essentially accurate, Zalith confirmed. Her translator made her voice sound eerily calm despite the circumstances. The Korthak Empire operates on principles of logical warfare. They analyze enemy capabilities, adapt their technology to counter threats, and apply overwhelming force where resistance exists. This approach has proven unstoppable against every galactic military force. Secretary of Defense Rodriguez leaned forward. And you think we're different because human military doctrine embraces controlled chaos, Dr. Felix interjected. The small gray alien had been introduced as the Council's expert on human psychology, though Webb suspected there wasn't much expertise to be had. Your species has repeatedly achieved victory through tactics that other species would consider suicidal or impossible. President Martinez, who had been listening quietly from the head of the table, spoke up. Can you give us specific examples? Dr. Felix activated his holographic display, showing historical images that made Webb's blood run cold. The aliens had been watching them for decades. The Battle of Thermopylae, 300 warriors holding off hundreds of thousands. Your World War II Pacific Theater, using aircraft filled with explosives as guided missiles. The Tet Offensive, turning a military defeat into a strategic victory through pure audacity. Desert Storm, achieving complete air superiority against a numerically superior force through unconventional tactics. You've been spying on us, Admiral Chen accused. Monitoring, Zelith corrected. Your planet has been under observation since your first radio transmissions. Standard protocol for emerging civilizations. But the point stands. Humans consistently win battles they should lose. Webb studied the tactical displays showing Korthak fleet movements. The enemy ships were massive, outnumbering Council forces by orders of magnitude. Their technology seemed almost magical in its effectiveness, but something about their formation patterns bothered him. They move like parade formations, he muttered. Excuse me? Zalith asked. Your enemy, Webb said, pointing at the holographic fleet arrangements. They move in perfect geometric patterns. Organized, logical, predictable. He stood and walked around the display. We'd call this fighting by the book. Very efficient, very effective against conventional opponents. And very vulnerable to unconventional tactics, Admiral Chen added, beginning to see where Webb was going. Precisely, Webb confirmed. Dr. Felix, you said they adapt quickly to threats. How quickly? The gray alien consulted his datapad. Usually within hours of first contact. They analyze attack patterns, defensive strategies, and technological capabilities, then modify their approach accordingly. But what if the attack pattern is no pattern at all? Webb asked. What if every engagement is completely different from the last? What if we never give them time to adapt? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. President Martinez looked around the table. General Webb, are you suggesting we commit Earth to an interstellar war based on the theory that we're crazier than the rest of the galaxy? Ma'am, with respect, I'm suggesting we're more creative, Webb replied. These Korthak sound like they've been fighting the same kind of enemy for decades. Logical, technologically advanced, conventional military forces. They've never faced guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare, or what we call thinking outside the box. Zelith's compound eyes focused on Webb with new intensity. What would you need from us? Intelligence, Webb said immediately. Everything you know about their technology, tactics, fleet compositions, and psychological profiles. Technical specifications for every weapon and defense system they use. Cultural information about how they think and make decisions. And in return, Webb looked at President Martinez, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. In return, we'll teach your people how to fight dirty, how to be unpredictable, how to turn your disadvantages into advantages. Webb paused, then added, "But there's something you need to understand about humans, Ambassador. We don't do anything halfway. If we're in this fight, we're in it to win, regardless of the cost." Dr. Felix shifted nervously. "General, the scale of this conflict is beyond anything in human experience. We're talking about fleets of thousands of ships, battles across multiple star systems simultaneously, weapons that can destroy planets." "Doctor," Admiral Chen interjected, "you're talking to a species that split the atom and pointed it at ourselves. Scale has never been our limiting factor." Zealith stood, her full height imposing even in the large conference room. "If we do this, there is no going back. Earth will be brought into galactic civilization. Your species will be known throughout the galaxy, but more immediately, the Korthak will eventually learn of your involvement. Earth will become a target." The weight of that statement settled over the room. They were discussing making humanity a player in a galactic war, with all the terrible consequences that implied. "How long do we have?" President Martinez asked. "The outer defensive line is holding, but barely," Zealith replied. "Conservative estimates give us 4 months before the Council core worlds are under direct assault. 2 months to prepare and deploy any new strategy." Webb felt the familiar electric feeling he got before major operations. 2 months to revolutionize galactic warfare. It's been done in less time, has it? Dr. Felix asked skeptically. "World War II, Admiral Chen replied. "We went from horse cavalry to nuclear weapons in 6 years. 2 months to teach aliens how to fight like humans? Challenge accepted." President Martinez stood, signaling the formal end of the discussion phase. "Ambassador Zealith, I need to consult with Congress and our allies, but unofficially, you have Earth's support. General Webb, I want preliminary plans on my desk in 48 hours. "Yes, ma'am," Webb replied. "Ambassador, we'll need a few dozen of your military commanders brought here for intensive training. And we'll need to send teams to your shipyards and military facilities." "That can be arranged," Zealith confirmed. "But General, you should know. Many Council species are terrified of humans. The psychological profiles we've developed suggest your species exhibits controlled psychopathy in combat situations. You may face resistance from those you're trying to help." Webb smiled grimly. "Ambassador, if they're more afraid of us than they are of certain extinction, then they deserve to lose this war. But don't worry. We've spent centuries learning how to work with people who don't trust us." As the meeting broke up and the aliens prepared to return to their ship, Dr. Felix approached Webb privately. "General, there's something else you should know," the gray alien said quietly. "The Council classified Earth as a death world partly because of your planet's environment, but mostly because of your species' psychological profiles. Your capacity for violence is unprecedented in galactic civilization. Is that a warning, Doctor?" "It's a hope," Dr. Felix replied. "The Korthak have never faced anything like you. For the first time in months, I actually believe we might survive this war." Webb watched the small alien leave, then turned to look at the holographic displays still showing the galactic situation. Somewhere out there, an empire of conquest was steamrolling through space, believing itself unstoppable. They were about to learn what happened when unstoppable force met human ingenuity, and Webb intended to make sure it was a lesson they'd never forget, assuming anyone survived to remember it. Admiral Corinth thought he'd seen every possible expression of fear in the galaxy, but watching a room full of seasoned military commanders recoil from a single human was something entirely new. Colonel Sarah Mitchell stood at the front of the briefing room aboard the Council flagship Eternal Harmony, seemingly oblivious to the fact that half the officers present were calculating escape routes. "Relax," Mitchell said with a grin that made the Seth representative's tail curl defensively. "I don't bite, usually." The joke didn't translate well. Several aliens actually moved further from the front row. "Perhaps we should begin," Corinth suggested, gesturing to the holographic display of the Korthak Empire's latest advance. "Colonel Mitchell, Ambassador Zealith has briefed you on our tactical situation?" "She has," Mitchell confirmed, studying the display with the same intensity she'd once used to plan missions in the Afghan mountains. "And I have to say, your people fight like they're afraid of making mistakes." The comment sparked angry chittering from several species. Commander Vex of the Aquatic Coalition rose from his specialized chair, water sloshing. Our tactics have been developed over millennia of civilized warfare. We follow established protocols that minimize casualties and you're losing, Mitchell interrupted. Badly. Your established protocols are about to get your entire civilization wiped out. She gestured to the display. Look at this formation. It's textbook perfect. Symmetrical, organized, predictable. The Korthak know exactly what you're going to do before you do it. Human doctrine is chaos, protested the ethereal representative, her translucent form flickering with agitation. Your species' military history is filled with unnecessary violence and reckless endangerment of personnel. Mitchell nodded. Absolutely. And that's why we win. She manipulated the holographic controls showing historical human battles. Normandy Beach, 1944. We threw 160,000 troops at the most heavily fortified coastline in human history. By all logical military analysis, it should have been a massacre. It was a massacre, observed Dr. Felix quietly. But we won, Mitchell continued, because sometimes victory requires accepting horrific costs that logical commanders won't pay. The Korthak expect you to value your own lives. They count on your rationality. They've built their entire strategy around fighting sane opponents. Admiral Corinth studied the human woman carefully. She was smaller than most species in the room, built like a runner rather than a warrior. But there was something in her eyes that made his survival instincts whisper warnings. Colonel, what exactly are you proposing? He asked. Mitchell smiled again, and this time even Corinth felt his scales ripple with unease. I'm proposing we teach the Korthak why humans are the only species crazy enough to evolve on a death world. She activated a new set of displays showing current Korthak fleet positions. Your intelligence reports say they adapt to threats within hours. So we don't give them hours. We hit them with something different every single time. No pattern, no logic, no predictability. Impossible, declared the Crystal Collective representative. Military efficiency requires coordination, which requires predictable protocols. Does it? Mitchell asked. Watch this. She pulled up a recording from Earth's military archives. The room watched in horrified fascination as human forces executed what they called a thunder run, armored vehicles charging directly through enemy territory, ignoring tactical doctrine, relying on speed and aggression to achieve objectives that conventional wisdom said were impossible. This violates every principle of sound military strategy. The ethereal representative whispered, and it worked, Mitchell replied. The enemy was so busy trying to figure out what we were really doing that they never adapted to what we were actually doing, driving, fast and shooting everything. Corinth felt something he hadn't experienced in months, a spark of hope. Colonel, can these tactics be adapted to space warfare? Not adapted, Mitchell corrected. Revolutionized. But it means your people need to learn to think like predators instead of prey. She gestured to a tactical display showing standard council battle formations. Your ships maintain perfect spacing, optimal firing solutions, maximum defensive efficiency. It's beautiful. It's also completely predictable. What alternative do you suggest? Asked Commander Vex. Mitchell's grin became positively predatory. Swarm tactics. Ship rams, suicide runs, feints that turn into real attacks that turn into feints. We make every engagement look like controlled chaos because it will be controlled chaos. The room erupted in protests from multiple species simultaneously. The cacophony of clicks, whistles, and translated arguments filled the air until Admiral Corinth called for order. Colonel, he said carefully, you're describing tactics that will result in massive casualties among our own forces. Smaller casualties than total extinction, Mitchell replied without hesitation. Look, I get it. You've built a civilization based on minimizing harm, maximizing efficiency, and fighting clean wars. That's admirable. But the Korthak don't care about your morality. They're going to kill everyone anyway. She manipulated the display to show projected casualty figures. Current trajectory. Complete galactic extinction within 6 months. My proposal. Heavy losses in the short term, but survival and eventual victory for the majority. Dr. Felix raised a small hand. Colonel, there are psychological factors to consider. Most galactic species aren't mentally equipped for the kind of warfare you're describing. Then we'll have to train them, Mitchell said simply. Starting with you, Admiral Corinth. All eyes turned to the purple-skinned warrior who'd led the Council's forces through months of devastating defeats. Me? You're going to learn to fight dirty, Mitchell announced. And then you're going to teach your captains. And they're going to teach their crews. We're going to turn your entire military into something the Korthak have never seen before. Which is what exactly? Corinth asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Mitchell's smile was absolutely terrifying. An army of Deathworlders. The silence that followed was broken by the ship's communication system crackling to life. Admiral Corinth to the bridge. Priority alert. As they made their way to the command center, Mitchell fell into step beside the admiral. Tell me, what's the most scared you've ever been in combat? Corinth considered the question. During the Battle of Helix Nebula, when the Korthak deployed their gravity weapons, we lost 60 ships in the first volley. Good, Mitchell said approvingly. Fear keeps you alive. But there's something else you need to learn. Sometimes you have to be more scared of losing than you are of dying. They reached the bridge to find controlled chaos. Sensor operators were calling out readings while communication officers tried to manage incoming reports from across the galaxy. Report, Corinth demanded. Sir, the Korthak have begun their assault on the tertiary defense line. Initial reports suggest... The officer paused, checking his readings. Sir, they're using new weapons. Something we've never seen before. The main display lit up with tactical data from the battle zone. Korthak ships were deploying some kind of energy field that was simply disintegrating council vessels on contact. They've adapted again, whispered Dr. Felix. Faster than ever before. Mitchell studied the display with professional interest. How long do you have before they break through? 72 hours, Corinth replied, his voice hollow with despair. Maybe less. Perfect, Mitchell said cheerfully, ignoring the shocked stares from around the bridge. That gives us just enough time for your first lesson in human-style warfare. Which is? Corinth asked. Mitchell's expression became deadly serious. Sometimes the best defense is a really, really good offense. Admiral, I want every ship you can spare. We're going to hit the Korthak where they don't expect it. Where's that? Everywhere, Mitchell replied. All at once. With tactics they've never seen, using weapons they didn't know existed, and strategies that violate every rule of civilized warfare. Admiral Corinth looked around his bridge at officers who'd been fighting a losing war for months. For the first time since the conflict began, he saw something besides fear in their eyes. He saw hope. Terrifying, desperate, human-inspired hope. Colonel Mitchell, he said formally, what are your orders? Her smile could have frightened a Korthak battle commander. Time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders do when they're really angry. Supreme Warlord Thekmor had conquered 47 species across 800 star systems. In 3 centuries of military service to the Korthak Empire, he had never encountered an enemy that could not be understood, analyzed, and ultimately defeated through superior tactics and overwhelming force. Today, staring at the tactical displays aboard his flagship Inevitable Conquest, he was beginning to question everything he knew about warfare. Report, he commanded, his forearms manipulating control interfaces while his cybernetic implants processed data streams from across the battle zone. Warlord, his intelligence officer replied, mandibles clicking nervously. The enemy has deployed irregular tactics. Our adaptation matrices are struggling to identify coherent patterns. Thekmor's primary eyes focused on the main display, while his secondary eyes monitored subsystem readings. What he saw defied logical military doctrine. Council ships were attacking in groups of 1, 3, 12, then 47 vessels. No discernible pattern to formation sizes. Some charged directly at Korthak positions with what appeared to be complete disregard for their own survival. Others hung back and sniped from maximum range. Still others seemed to be flying in random directions until they suddenly converged on targets with devastating precision. Analysis of attack vectors? He demanded. Inconclusive, Warlord, his tactical officer reported. Each engagement follows completely different parameters. We adapt our defenses to counter one strategy, and they implement something entirely different for the next attack. Thekmor had fought the Council for months, and their tactics had been depressingly predictable. Organized formations, logical targeting priorities, conservative resource management. His forces had adapted to their strategies within hours of first contact, then systematically dismantled their fleets with methodical precision. This was different. This was chaos, Warlord. his sensor operator called out. Massive energy spike in Sector 7. The enemy is... They're ramming our ships. Thekmor's attention snapped to the indicated display. 3 council vessels had accelerated to maximum velocity and were literally throwing themselves at Korthak heavy cruisers. The impacts destroyed both attacking and defending ships, but the exchange ratio was heavily in the council's favor. Suicide tactics, his intelligence officer observed. Highly inefficient. They're trading 3 ships to destroy one of ours. No, Thekmor said slowly, his enhanced brain processing the implications. They're trading 3 smaller ships to destroy 1 larger ship. The mass differential makes it an advantageous exchange. He paused, studying the tactical display. They're not being suicidal. They're being economical. Another alert chimed. Warlord, enemy force in Sector 12 is requesting single combat between individual ships. Their lead vessel is broadcasting challenges to our captains. Thekmor's mandibles clicked in confusion. Single combat. That's a primitive concept. What's the strategic value? Unknown, Warlord. But Captain Vexthar has accepted the challenge. The main display switched to show 2 ships, a Yarden Korthak heavy fighter and a smaller council vessel, maneuvering around each other in what appeared to be an elaborate dance. The council ship was clearly outmatched, but it was moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. How was it performing those maneuvers? Thekmor demanded. Analyzing, his tactical officer replied. Warlord, they've disabled their inertial compensators. The crew is experiencing massive gravitational forces that should kill most species, but they're maintaining combat effectiveness. The dance continued for several minutes until the council ship suddenly executed a maneuver that brought it within point-blank range of the Korthak vessel. Both ships fired simultaneously. Both ships exploded. Another trade, Thekmor muttered. They're treating their crews as expendable resources. Warlord, his communication officer interrupted. We're receiving multiple surrender signals from Sector E. 5, approximately 40 council. Ships are offering to surrender, Thekmor's. Tactical implants immediately began. Calculating the logistics of accepting so many prisoners. Standard protocols. Accept their surrender and prepare boarding teams. Sir, the officer continued nervously. They're requesting to surrender to specific Korthak captains. They're asking for our ship rosters and captain names. Something cold crawled up Thekmor's spine. Why would they need our ship rosters? His question was answered 15 minutes later when the surrendering council ships suddenly accelerated toward their assigned Korthak vessels. But instead of ramming attacks, they deployed some kind of new weapon that seemed to phase through Korthak shields and hulls. Report, Thekmor roared as 12 of his ships simply vanished from the tactical display. Unknown weapon type, his science officer reported. It appears to be some kind of quantum disruptor. Warlord, they used their surrender request to gather intelligence on our fleet positions and ship classifications. They tricked us, Thekmor said, his voice filled with something he hadn't felt in decades. Uncertainty. The battle continued for hours, but every engagement brought new surprises. Council ships that appeared damaged would suddenly reveal hidden weapon systems. Retreating formations would circle back for surprise attacks. Some enemy vessels would broadcast false distress signals, then destroy any Korthak ships that responded. Warlord, his intelligence officer reported. We've identified the source of these new tactics. There are alien crew members aboard council ships, species designation unknown, but they appear to be directing the unconventional strategies. Show me. The main display shifted to show intercepted communications from a council vessel. Thekmor watched a bipedal creature with pink skin and strange facial hair barking orders at a mixed crew of galactic species. Biological analysis, he demanded. Inconclusive, Warlord. They appear to be from a high-gravity world. Bone density is approximately 3 times galactic standard. Muscle structure suggests they evolved as persistence hunters. Psychological profile indicates. The science officer paused, double-checking his readings. Sir, they register as clinically insane by our psychological standards. Explain. They appear to actively seek dangerous situations for recreational purposes. Their brain chemistry suggests they actually experience pleasure from combat stress. And, Warlord, the science officer's voice carried a note of disbelief. They seem to be treating this entire battle as if it were some kind of game. As if summoned by those words, the communication system crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The main display showed one of the pink-skinned aliens, a female, based on biological indicators. sitting in what appeared to be the command center of a council warship. "Attention, Korthak fleet," the creature said, its voice carrying tones that Thekmor's translator struggled to interpret. "This is Colonel Sarah Mitchell of the Human Coalition. I want to personally thank you for the most fun we've had in decades." "Fun?" Thekmor found himself speaking aloud. "You guys have been steamrolling the galaxy for months, and honestly, it was getting pretty boring watching you win every battle the same way," the human continued. "But now we get to play. And let me tell you, we humans love games where the stakes are life and death." The transmission ended, leaving Thekmor staring at a blank screen. In 3 centuries of warfare, no enemy had ever thanked him for the opportunity to fight. "Warlord," his tactical officer reported, "enemy reinforcements are entering the battle zone. Approximately 200 ships, but—" He paused, rechecking his readings. "Sir, they're not following any formation we recognize. Some are moving at maximum speed. Others are barely crawling. They're spread across the entire system with no apparent coordination." Thekmor studied the tactical display, trying to identify the pattern behind the apparent chaos. Then it hit him. "They're not trying to coordinate. They're trying to be unpredictable. Warlord, every species we've conquered fights the same way, organized, logical, predictable. Our adaptive systems analyze their tactics and develop counters. But these humans," he gestured at the display, "they're not using tactics. They're using creativity." As he spoke, the scattered human-influenced forces began their attack. But instead of a coordinated assault, it was more like 200 individual captains all making up their own strategies simultaneously. The result was complete chaos that somehow achieved devastating effectiveness. "Damage report," Thekmor commanded. "Significant losses across all sectors," his tactical officer replied. "Our adaptive systems can't lock onto consistent patterns to counter. Every ship is fighting a different kind of battle." For the first time in his military career, Supreme Warlord Thekmor considered the possibility of retreat. "Sir," his communication officer interrupted, "we're receiving another transmission from the human." The display showed the same female, but now she was standing in what appeared to be a damaged ship, smoke visible in the background. "Hey there," she said casually. "Quick question, do you guys ever fight just for the hell of it? Because that's kind of our thing. We've got about 50 more tricks we want to try, and you make such great test subjects." The transmission cut off again, leaving Thekmor to contemplate the most terrifying possibility he'd ever encountered. The galaxy had just met a species that didn't just wage war for conquest or resources, they waged war because they enjoyed it. Admiral Corinth had never seen anything like the human war room aboard the hastily retrofitted Council flagship. Instead of the calm, organized command centers he was used to, this space buzzed with controlled chaos. Humans moved between holographic displays with what looked like barely contained energy, while alien officers struggled to keep up with the rapid-fire planning sessions. "Status report," Colonel Mitchell called out, not looking up from a tactical display showing the entire galactic front. "The Korthak are pulling back from 7 different sectors," reported Captain Torres, one of the human military advisors. "They've never retreated from multiple fronts simultaneously before." "They're not retreating," corrected Dr. Sarah Chen, the xenopsychologist who'd been studying Korthak behavior patterns. "They're regrouping. My analysis suggests they're trying to consolidate forces for a massive counterattack." Admiral Corinth studied the strategic display with growing amazement. 3 weeks of human-inspired tactics had fundamentally changed the war. Council forces that had been fleeing in terror for months were now advancing on multiple fronts. The Korthak Empire, seemingly unstoppable for decades, was on the defensive for the first time in their recorded history. "How many ships do they have in reserve?" Mitchell asked. "Intelligence estimates somewhere between 8 and 12,000 vessels," Corinth replied. "More than triple our current strength." "Perfect," Mitchell said with that predatory smile Corinth had learned to find both reassuring and terrifying. "They're thinking like an empire again. Big numbers, conventional deployment, overwhelming force." "Colonel," interrupted Ambassador Zelith, who'd been monitoring communications from the Galactic Council, "we're receiving reports from civilian populations across the galaxy. Word is spreading about human involvement in the war effort. The psychological impact is significant." "Good news or bad news?" asked Captain Torres. "Both," Zelith replied. "Many species are experiencing hope for the first time in months. But others are questioning whether survival under human influence is preferable to extinction under the Korthak. Corinth understood those concerns. Working alongside humans for 3 weeks had been simultaneously inspiring and deeply unsettling. They approached warfare with an enthusiasm that bordered on disturbing, finding creative solutions to tactical problems that more civilized species would never consider. "Admiral," Mitchell said, turning to face him, "what's the most important target in Korthak space?" "Their command nexus at Terminus Prime," Corinth replied immediately. "It's their central coordination hub. Every major military decision flows through that system, and it's protected by approximately 2,000 ships, orbital defense platforms, and energy shields that could repel anything short of a Nova-class explosion." Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "So a direct assault would be suicide?" "Absolutely. Any force large enough to breach those defenses would be detected weeks in advance and met with overwhelming opposition. Which is why we're not going to assault it," Mitchell announced. The room fell silent. Even the other humans looked puzzled. "Colonel," Dr. Chen said carefully, "if we're not attacking their command center, what exactly are we doing?" Mitchell's grin was absolutely terrifying. "We're going to steal it." The silence stretched longer. Admiral Corinth felt his understanding of human psychology reaching new levels of disturbed fascination. "Explain," he requested. "The Korthak have spent centuries building their empire on the principle of overwhelming force," Mitchell began, manipulating the holographic display to show shipping routes and supply lines. "They protect their important assets by making them too strong to attack. But they've never had to defend against someone who didn't want to attack." Captain Torres caught on first. "You want to physically relocate their command center?" "Not the whole thing," Mitchell clarified. "Just the important parts. Command staff, central computers, strategic databases. Strip out everything that makes Terminus Prime the nerve center of their empire." "That's impossible," Corinth protested. "The security systems alone are designed to repel military attacks," Mitchell interrupted. "Not to prevent infiltration by people who aren't trying to conquer the facility." Dr. Chen was already running calculations on her tablet. "The logistics would be nightmarish. We'd need specialized equipment, detailed intelligence, and a way to get operatives inside their most secure facility." "Already working on it," Mitchell replied. "Torres, what's the status on our special project?" "Phase 1 complete," Torres reported. "We've successfully disguised a human strike team as Korthak prisoners of war. The psychological conditioning should hold up under casual inspection." Corinth's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Psychological conditioning?" "Humans are natural actors," explained Dr. Chen. "We can convincingly simulate emotional states and behavioral patterns. Your people have been taking Korthak prisoners for months. We've studied their body language, speech patterns, and cultural behaviors. But the physical differences are less significant than you'd think," Mitchell said. "Korthak are roughly humanoid, and their battle armor conceals most species-specific features. With the right equipment and training, a human team can pass for captured Korthak soldiers." The plan was insane, but Corinth was beginning to realize that insanity might be humanity's greatest military asset. "How do you get captured Korthak soldiers to Terminus Prime?" he asked. "That's where you come in, Admiral," Mitchell replied. "We need your fastest ship and your best crew for a very special mission." 3 hours later, Corinth found himself aboard the Council scout ship Quantum Wind, watching a team of humans prepare for what was either the most brilliant or most suicidal operation in galactic military history. The humans wore modified Korthak armor and had undergone temporary biological modifications to alter their scent signatures and thermal patterns. Their weapons were Korthak designs taken from previous battles. Even their movement patterns had been adjusted to match captured surveillance footage. "Remember," Mitchell briefed her team, "you're demoralized prisoners who've been fighting a losing war for months. Act defeated but not broken. The Korthak respect strength even in their enemies." "What's our extraction plan?" asked Sergeant Rodriguez, one of the infiltration specialists. "You don't have one," Mitchell replied matter-of-factly. "This is a one-way mission. You get in, you complete the objective, and you improvise your way out." The casual acceptance of those terms by her team gave Corinth new insight into human psychology. They weren't just willing to risk their lives. They seemed genuinely excited about the challenge. "Admiral," Mitchell continued, Your job is to deliver our prisoners to the Korthak fleet, then get far enough away to avoid suspicion. After that, we wait. How long? Corinth asked. However long it takes, Mitchell replied. Could be days, could be weeks. But when these people are done, the Korthak Empire is going to wake up one morning and discover they can't coordinate their military operations. As they approached the designated coordinates, where Korthak patrol fleets had been intercepting refugee ships, Corinth felt a mixture of hope and terror that had become his constant companion since the humans arrived. Contact, reported his sensor operator. Korthak patrol fleet, 6 ships moving to intercept. Right on schedule, Mitchell observed. Admiral, you know what to do. Corinth activated the communication system, preparing to deliver the performance of his military career. He was about to convince the Korthak that he was a desperate council officer trying to trade prisoners for safe passage. It was a lie that could save the galaxy, or doom them all to something worse than extinction. Korthak, vessels, he broadcast. This is Admiral Corinth of the Council Defense Force. I request parley under the Galactic Convention for Prisoner Exchange. The response came quickly. Council ship prepared to be boarded. Any resistance will result in your immediate destruction. Acknowledged, Corinth replied, then cut the communication. Mitchell clapped him on the shoulder. Showtime, Admiral. Let's go steal an empire. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez had done a lot of crazy things in his military career, but walking through the corridors of the most secure facility in Korthak space while disguised as an enemy prisoner was definitely a new personal record for insanity. The infiltration had worked perfectly. Too perfectly, if he was being honest. The Korthak guards had accepted their prisoner transport credentials without question, processed them through their security systems with bureaucratic efficiency, and escorted them to detention cells in the high-security section of Terminus Prime. Now, 72 hours later, Rodriguez and his team were moving through the station's command levels with stolen access codes and a mission that would either end the war or get them all killed in very creative ways. Status check, he whispered into his concealed communicator. Demolitions team in position, reported Corporal Kim. I'm looking at enough computing power to run half the galaxy. This is going to be fun to break. Intelligence team ready, confirmed Staff Sergeant Williams. I've got access to their strategic database. Mike, the stuff in here, it's not just about this war. They've been planning galactic conquest for over a century. Copy that, Rodriguez replied. Extraction team? Standing by, came the response from Private Chen. But boss, we've got a problem. Security sweeps have increased. I think they're starting to suspect something. Rodriguez wasn't surprised. The plan had always been ambitious to the point of impossibility. But Colonel Mitchell had been clear about the objectives. Steal or destroy everything that made Terminus Prime the nerve center of the Korthak Empire. Make it impossible for them to coordinate their massive military machine. Execute Phase 1, he ordered. Across the station, his team began their work. Kim's demolitions expertise focused on the central processing cores that coordinated Korthak fleet movements across the galaxy. Williams downloaded strategic databases while planting logic bombs in their software systems. Chen prepared their escape route while monitoring security responses. Rodriguez had the most important and dangerous job, infiltrating the station's command center during a shift change to plant Colonel Mitchell's special surprise. The device looked like nothing more than a standard Korthak data storage unit, but according to the human scientists who'd built it, it contained something that would revolutionize the war effort. Rodriguez didn't understand the technical details, but he trusted Mitchell's judgment. He'd learned that was usually the smart bet when dealing with human military planning. Moving through the corridors required every bit of training he'd received in enemy infiltration. The modified Korthak armor helped, but it was the psychological preparation that made the difference. He thought like a defeated prisoner who'd been broken by months of warfare, keeping his movement sluggish and his posture submissive. The command center was a marvel of alien engineering. Massive holographic displays showed the tactical situation across hundreds of star systems. Korthak officers moved between control stations with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat. That was about to change. Rodriguez waited for the shift rotation, then moved during the brief period of confusion when new officers were taking their positions. The device went into a secondary data processing unit, hidden among dozens of similar components. Package delivered, he reported. Copy that, Williams replied. Database download complete. You need to see this intelligence, Mike. The Korthak aren't just conquering the galaxy, they're preparing to move beyond it. Beyond it how? Extragalactic expansion. They've got plans for systematic conquest of neighboring galaxies. This isn't just an empire, it's a universal domination strategy. Rodriguez felt cold understanding wash over him. The stakes were even higher than anyone had realized. All teams execute Phase 2, he ordered. Time to go loud. The station's alarms began wailing as Kim's charges detonated throughout the facility. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows while automated systems tried to assess the damage. Korthak personnel rushed toward the explosions, leaving other areas temporarily understaffed. Rodriguez's team moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency. Their escape route took them through maintenance corridors that Chen had scouted during their reconnaissance phase. But as they approached the docking bay where they'd hidden their emergency transport, Rodriguez realized their luck had run out. Boss, Chen's voice was tight with tension. We've got company. Looks like they figured out we weren't actually prisoners. The docking bay was crawling with Korthak security forces. Their stolen transport was surrounded and energy weapons were already charging for defensive positions. Options? Rodriguez asked. We could fight our way through, suggested Kim. But the odds aren't great. Or, Williams added, we could try Plan B. Plan B was something Colonel Mitchell had mentioned during their briefing. It wasn't really a plan so much as a philosophy. When everything goes wrong, do something so unexpected that the enemy can't adapt fast enough to stop you. What did you have in mind? Rodriguez asked. Williams pointed to a nearby maintenance shaft. The station's waste disposal system connects to the main reactor cooling intake. If we can reach it, we might be able to use the thermal vents to reach the outer hull. That's completely insane, Chen observed. Yeah, Rodriguez agreed. Which means it might actually work. Move out. What followed was the most terrifying hour of Rodriguez's life. The team crawled through waste disposal systems that weren't designed for biological entities, then used emergency spacesuits to traverse cooling systems, where the temperature fluctuations should have killed them. But they made it to the outer hull just as Colonel Mitchell's special device activated. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Terminus Prime's lights flickered, then went out entirely. Emergency power systems came online, then failed. Communication arrays went silent. Even the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. What the hell did we just do? Kim asked as they sealed their emergency escape pod. We gave the galaxy's best hackers access to the Korthak Central Computer Network, Rodriguez replied, activating their beacon to signal for pickup. Every system they've ever built, every ship they've ever launched, every tactical database they've ever compiled, it's all connected through Terminus Prime. And now? Rodriguez smiled as their pickup ship appeared on sensors. It was Admiral Corinth's flagship, right on schedule. Now we find out if humans are better at breaking things than the Korthak are at fixing them. 3 days later, Rodriguez stood in the war room aboard the Council flagship, watching holographic displays that showed the collapse of Korthak military coordination across the galaxy. Status report, Colonel Mitchell requested. Total success, reported Dr. Chen, the xenopsychologist who'd been monitoring Korthak communications. Their command structure has completely broken down. Individual fleets are operating independently, often contradicting each other's orders. Fleet commanders are requesting instructions from Terminus Prime, but the station is completely offline, added Admiral Corinth. Some Korthak forces are retreating, others are advancing, and still others are attacking each other because they can't coordinate properly. How long until they adapt? Mitchell asked. Unknown, Dr. Chen replied. They've never faced systemic network infiltration before. Their entire military doctrine assumes central coordination will always be available. Rodriguez watched the tactical displays showing Korthak forces scattered across the galaxy, suddenly transformed from an unstoppable military machine into thousands of confused, isolated units. Colonel, he said. What happens next? Mitchell's smile was equal parts satisfaction and anticipation. Next, Sergeant, we teach the galaxy what happens when Deathworlders really get angry. She gestured to the holographic display showing human fleet positions. Phase 1 was about proving we could fight differently. Phase 2 was about breaking their ability to coordinate. Phase 3, she paused, and Rodriguez realized he was looking at the expression of a predator that had cornered its prey. Phase 3 is where we show them why humans are the only species crazy enough to evolve on a death world. We're going to end this war in a way that ensures no one ever threatens the galaxy again. Rodriguez looked around the room at the mixture of human and alien, officers who'd learned to work together against impossible odds. 3 months ago, most of these species had been terrified of humanity. Now they were planning the liberation of their galaxy under human leadership. "Sir," he said formally, "what are your orders?" Colonel Mitchell's grin was absolutely terrifying. "We're going to do what humans do best, Sergeant. We're going to win a war that everyone said was impossible to win." As alarms began sounding throughout the ship, signaling the start of what would later be called the final campaign, Rodriguez realized he was about to witness something unprecedented in galactic history, the transformation of the human species from isolated Deathworlders into the galaxy's greatest hope for survival, and he wouldn't have missed it for anything.